Hi. I was just musing on what sort of title I could give this video because there's a number of things I want to cover. Probably will be one of my longer videos, so multitask. These days I feel obliged to say that because I do tend to make longer videos, so for retention purposes, feel free to multitask. So, I've been seeing ads from groups like Greenpeace pushing petitions for people to sign um, under the guise of protecting protest. And this is a response to the public order bill, which such groups say is taking away the right to protest. And I'm disappointed to say that groups like Amnesty International have jumped on this bandwagon as well. Um, Here's the thing: there's a lot of dishonesty in what they are putting out there. This idea that protest is being taken away. Now, if anyone who has actually looked at the public order bill will see it's actually quite a moderate um, proposal. Its details are not taking away the right to protest, rather they are giving the police powers to act on specific kinds of activity. So, for example, if you have an Extinction Rebellion or Insulate Britain activist who brings along tools deliberately to attach themselves to a building, the police have the power to take away those tools. Um, it prohibits blocking thoroughfares, for example, and there's other areas that are outlined in that. I've made a video specifically about this before, so I'm not going to go into huge details about that bill. But I might put a link in the video just for people's reference point. But the point is, it's not banning protest. And I think that is a scaremongering lie by groups like Greenpeace. Because what they're saying basically, and for Greenpeace, although it's a much older organization, it's basically, I mean, it's not directly linked, but it basically is giving a green light to the likes of Extinction Rebellion and Insulate Britain. It sees them as sister groups or Greenpeace, of course, is an old organization. I think it goes back to, I don't know actually if it's the 70s or late 60s, but these new eco groups are possibly even more hardline in their approach. Now, I don't want to make this all about those groups because I have made quite a few videos about them. Like a lot of people, they have really rubbed me up the wrong way because I think that they have adopted tactics which are totally counterproductive. I think they've shown a contempt for democracy, and they failed to introspect. This is the key thing about these groups. They just will not introspect. Now, to my line of thinking, if you're heading a group, some sort of campaign or some sort of movement, common sense dictates that you would want some sort of feedback as to how successful it is being. Are you getting public support? Are you changing anything? Now, these groups, they're sort of decentralized. They don't have specific leaders, although there's some sort of leading figures. Roger Hallam, for example, with Extinction Rebellion. Um, but they don't have any clear cut leaders. They don't have any headquarters or anything like that, and that's deliberate. It's so that they can be quite fluid and quite a little bit like anonymous, I guess, in that sense. It's a clever tactic because it means that they're harder to tackle. Um, but they have no responsibility. They have no sense of introspection. Like, well, wait a second, should we maybe not use these tactics? Are these really working? And actually, I think that failure of having a structure within themselves, a coherent structure, is part of the danger of these groups. Why? Because, well, I'll cite an example. When I think it was 2 years ago now, you had an offshoot of Extinction Rebellion who took it on themselves to hold up a London Overground train. I think it was at Canning Town. They actually stood on the train, they blocked it. It absolutely infuriated commuters. Some of them even chucked bottles at them and stuff because they were just infuriated. They wanted to get to work. They didn't want the journey held up. Now, interestingly, the sort of main group of Extinction Rebellion claimed that they didn't know about this particular incident and they didn't sanction it. They didn't condemn it, but they claimed that that wasn't one of their main activities. So The problem with not having a centralized format or a centralized structure is you could get anyone who will attach themselves to a cause and then do, you know, anything in their name. Now, this is not to say that I think Extinction Rebellion or Insulate Britain are moderate groups. I don't. I think generally they are zealots, but I think you get the risk of even more hardline zealots within them. I mean, there's something that's important to remember. What I'm really driving at here is dogma, is the issue of dogma, right? So every terrorist group, almost every terrorist group, perhaps with some exceptions, Islamic State was extremely fanatical from the start, but most terrorist groups start off not being violent extremists. They start off as some sort of campaign, right? And then they tend to morph into more extreme activity because they justify to themselves the government's not listening, so we need to use more extreme tactics to get attention, which is perverse, of course. But this is the point. Terrorists will always justify to themselves. So whether it be Islamist terrorists, whether it be far right terrorists, you name it. I mean, to quote briefly an example, the Proud Boys have just been infiltrated in Florida. Apparently, they were going to attack a Pride event. Well, that's terrible. You know, that would have been a major terrorist attack. And it's right that they're apprehended, and I hope they serve long prison sentences. But they will say, well, there were children being subjected to drag shows and so on, which is wrong. I think is also wrong. Um, this is not to say we need to listen to the demands of extremists or we need to um, cave into demands. Not at all. In fact, I'm saying the reverse. What I am saying is that if people justify to themselves that something is wrong, then they'll justify their activity in response to it. Um, and my concern is, we've seen violent activity with Islamist groups, particularly also with far right groups. I really do think it is plausible that some green zealots, some eco zealots will elevate to that sort of level. Now, it hasn't happened yet. So far, they haven't planted bombs or driven cars into anybody. But I don't think it is implausible that you will get some people, and there might well be crossover with other ideologies, but who will use the environmental cause as an excuse to basically elevate to the next level. I hope it doesn't happen. I hope I'm wrong. I really do. But after all, these groups are coming out with millenarian doomsday prophecies. We're all going to die in 5 years. Billions of people will die. Um, I take the view that there are some very pressing issues in terms of ecology. Climate change is a real threat. I think that there are, serious, serious problems like plastic waste. Um, those are all really pressing issues. But I do not share the doomsday cult-like scaremongering of such groups. I mean, I think it's reckless to tell children that they're all going to die. Um, and I think there's a danger to them. I mean, if we look at a group like Insulate Britain, they tend to be made up of very middle England types. I mean, we're talking about retired clergymen and women. We're talking about doctors. We're talking about, in any other guise, would be fairly normal people. Yet, from whatever the reason is, whether it is they have some sort of narcissism, whether it's that they've been brainwashed, whether whatever it might be, they have felt compelled to take these extreme actions. They will say they're terrified for the future. But the problem is, they're being terrified, it's affecting the rest of us. It's zealotry, it's dogma. And they're basically saying, I mean, I wouldn't put it past some of the younger members to be exploiting some of the older members who may not be entirely stable. I don't want to make it an age thing. Indeed, there could be younger members who are vulnerable. I wouldn't at all be surprised if these groups are grooming vulnerable people. And I say that in all seriousness because far right types have, Islamists have. What's to stop Green zealots doing the same thing? I mean, if you have a vulnerable person who perhaps already suffers from serious anxiety, and then they somehow get into a forum or activity where they're subjected to being told all the time, the planet's dying, the government's doing nothing, we're all going to die in 5 years. Of course, it's going to be terrifying. And then they may feel motivated to go to the next level, which is gluing themselves to a road. And then, having failed that, they may feel motivated to go to an even further level. Well, the government's not listening, so let's drive a car into a crowd. I mean, these are disturbing possibilities, but unfortunately, I think they are possibilities, and I really hope I'm wrong. And it's not a conspiracy theory because I'm not saying this has happened. I'm not saying it definitely will happen. I'm saying if we look at extremism in this country and elsewhere, every extremist group believes they're justified. Far right types think that their countries are being invaded. They believe in the white replacement theory and all the rest of it. So they feel motivated to act against that. Islamists feel that they are religiously bound to spread the caliphate violently. Um, so there's a lot of motivating factors, no matter how distorted or perverse it is to the rest of us. The point is, extremists themselves believe they're justified, and that's what's so dangerous. So, firstly, the public order bill is not taking away the right to protest. That lie needs to be confronted because I think people with good intentions will sign the petition thinking that's what's happening. Rather, what the public order bill is a response by the government to widespread public anger about the activities of such groups. The public expect further action. The public expect the police to have the powers to act against these people. In fact, the overwhelming consensus is not, oh, we better give these people the right to protest. The consensus is the right to protest does not give you a right to hurt ordinary people. I mean, it's utterly nonsensical. I've given up trying to reason with them. I don't think they're interested in reason. It's another personification of dogma, I think. But I don't think they're interested in reason. But their tactics have utterly failed. I mean, I could say to them, well, look, how is gluing yourself to a road or telling a person who is tearfully pleading with you to see their relatives or a key worker getting to their job, how is any of that stopping, say, forests being cut down in Brazil or helping a fisherman in Bangladesh or a farmer in Ethiopia? It doesn't. It just doesn't. All it does is aggravate the wider public. It has actually got the government to act, not in the way they want. It's got the government to introduce this bill, which I think is a justified bill. Now, if this bill is used, because some will say, well, it's a recipe for creeping authoritarianism. If another bill is introduced, or several other bills are introduced over time that gradually take away more and more rights to peaceful protest, I would be outraged and I would say that's wrong. The right to peaceful dissent is part of a democracy. But I think zealots confuse what they see as the rights with the responsibilities. Although, of course, they would put it, well, actually, do have a responsibility to do this. But I call it the tyranny of the minority. I mean, these people behave like mini tyrants. We can do what we please because we're hiding behind a cause. And that's it. That's pretty much their thinking. They justify it to themselves. They literally say, we don't care what the public think. I mean, they have literally said that. We don't care what the public think. They know that they caused a woman to have a stroke, and I may have mentioned that several times, but I think it's an important point. It's incredible that that's the only such incident that happened. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if there were other incidents that weren't recorded because the amount of disruption that they caused, thousands and thousands and thousands of people held up. Um, all they've done is got the wider public to feel contempt towards them. That's the truth. So what I'm saying is it is not democracy to allow a minority to do what they want. Minority rights should be protected in the sense that minorities shouldn't be persecuted. And by minorities here, I'm talking politically. I'm not talking necessarily about demographic minorities. I'm talking political minorities. Um, the freedom of expression is there, right? But if they're going to if they're going to get into antics, which hurt the rest of us, absolutely there should be action against them. They do not have that right. They just don't. I think dogma is a very dangerous thing. I mean, most people, if they're being honest, have strong views about at least one subject. I know I have strong views about numerous subjects. I feel very strongly about crime. So I don't respect the point of view that we should be lenient with criminals. I have strong views on the gun issue, although it's less of a political issue in this country. I have strong views on a lot of things. I've got strong views about the need to be assertive with the Chinese and Russian governments, and I've got very much no respect for people, whether they be public figures or private individuals, who support such regimes. I think they're treacherous. So I have strong views. But I never extend that to saying there should be violence against such people. I never extend that to saying, well, this idiot supports Putin, so let's throw him in jail for 10 years. I say such positions should attract shame and stigma, but I don't say they suddenly lose their rights. Now, if it extends, let's say they are a university professor, let's just say for the sake of argument, someone is a university professor, or they're working in the military, or they're a civil servant with some connection to the government, and they hold a very pro Putin view, then I would say there is an issue there of national security. If they are actively working for a hostile foreign state, um, there's definitely a red line there. Private individuals who support Putin, I think they deserve all the condemnation and critique that they get. But if they're not breaking the law, they're not breaking the law. Um, I think well, I've no respect for them. But what I'm driving at is there is a difference between having a strong conviction and dogma to the point where you think you could do as you please. I mean, I cannot take on any of my strong views, whether it be on crime, um, that's a particular one in this country, or other issues, and extend that to be violent. To use an example from The Crown, and this might sound like I'm derailing a little bit from the theme, but I don't think it is. I think it's important. There's an episode where Lord Altrincham, it's 1957. Lord Altrincham was a Tory peer and a journalist, and he wrote rather scathing articles on the royal family, particularly the Queen. And he wrote about her being a priggish schoolgirl. Now, if you're familiar with that episode, I forget the name of the episode now, but I think it's marionettes. I can't quite remember. But if you remember the episode, at the start of the episode, so this guy, Lord Altrincham, John Grigg, has made speeches, and he's done an interview on the Robin Day show. As he comes out, a real hard right conservative type, who apparently was part of a far right group called the League of Loyal Imperialists or something like that, assaults him. He just punches the man. Now, in a civic society, you can't just punch someone; it's assault, no matter how strongly you feel about something. So that man got arrested for assault. He got charged a pound. He was released without further charge. But you can't have a situation where unpopular opinions result in people being assaulted. What you can have is a situation where unpopular opinions are forcefully challenged, or you get people who are holding obnoxious or controversial positions, like I say, are challenged. What you cannot do is allow the zealotry of the minority to descend into actions that hurt the majority. And that's why I think Insulate Britain, what they're doing is they're not saying this is our opinion, and we think the government's not listening, and we think this is a pressing crisis and we have to act. They're actually taking action, and they're hurting the public because they're causing profound stress to people. They are disrupting people's daily lives. They are stopping people seeing relatives. They are causing dangerous situations, literally. Summed up, a lot of people forget that with rights come responsibilities. And in a democracy, we all have responsibilities. You have a responsibility not to break the law. You have a responsibility not to hurt people. Um, and you have a responsibility to at least try to be a decent citizen. And that's it. It's not asking too much. Um, because there are parts of the world where people have no rights. You know, we take things for granted, freedom of expression and so on. Um, And it's not to say that this country is perfect. It's not to say that we should be complacent about those things. I think, for example, there is far too much legislation monitoring basically opinions. So when I talk about free speech, ideally that's what democracy should protect. But honestly, although the United Kingdom is certainly a lot more free than some parts of the world, we're not a perfect situation. I think the police spend far, far too much time policing language. I have a big problem, for example, when someone gets a knock on the door because they've used the wrong pronoun online, or malicious communication, things like that, I think need to be scrutinized, or hate crime legislation that ends up protecting religious groups. Um, these sort of things need to be very closely scrutinized, but actions are a verifiable thing. And within the realm of speech, if you're making clear threats, then you can't complain that your free speech is being violated. If you're actually threatening someone and it's a verifiable threat, um, but that's the the sort of situation that we need to question. For example, if someone makes a racist comments about black footballers, that's abhorrent, and I think they should be condemned. But should they really be going to prison for that instead of, say, a football hooligan who is actually vandalizing, um, who knows, a pub or whatever it is, a train, throwing the weight around a train? I think the more serious offence should be physical actions, always. Let me know your thoughts. I'm going to wrap this up. But ultimately, I'm just going to say dogma can be dangerous. And in a free society, we have rights. We also have responsibilities to other people. And I firmly believe that if we start allowing fringe minorities to do as they please because they think they have a right to do so, we end up with anarchy. I mean, we may as well discard all laws. I think Greenpeace is scaremongering. I think they're being dishonest. And I think the public order bill is totally justified.